Hello everyone, welcome to our HTML basics course. I am here to support you every step of the way. Let's dive back into the exciting world of HTML together and create some amazing web content. Today, we are going to learn about HTML lists. Let us look at unordered HTML lists. In our folder, we are going to create a new file. Let us start by writing our boilerplate. Click on Shift and then the exclamation mark and hit on your tab. We are going to give it a title list. Inside our body, we are going to start with an unordered list which has a UL tag, and the items start with the LI tag. And our LI tag, we're going to begin with coffee. Let us have another item. Let's call it tea. Let us call it milk. Let us link our CSS file with our HTML file here. We are going to use a link. Style sheet. Then our link, which is style.css file, and then we come to our style.css file, and we are going now to style our unordered HTML list. We'll say ul open and close curly braces, and then we're going to write lists style, list style type. We need style type. Let us choose circle, and you are able to see that our unordered style list has now been changed to circle. We can also change it to square. Come here and change it to square, and you can go ahead and practice on the different markers that we have and see the changes that are there. Next, we are going to look at nested HTML lists. Inside our unordered list, we are going to have nested lists. That is, after T, we can have another unordered list. Inside the unordered list, we can have our list, and we can have black tea. We can have black tea, and we can also have this green tea. You see, now we have a nested list. That is a list inside another list. We can also have a horizontal list with CSS. Let us go ahead and see how horizontal list with CSS looks like, or how we can style our horizontal list with CSS. Let us have a different list. We will comment on this and write inside our body. Let us write our unordered list and have list items. We're going to have list items as a link, and these links, I'll copy these and have at least home. I'm going to have about and news. We can say contact us. Let us refresh our page. Now we have these links here, but we want them to appear horizontally. So what we do, let us go to our style.css file, and this is how we are going to style it. On our unordered list, we are going to use none. Then we are going to have margin. We're going to have margin equals to 0. We're going to write padding equals to 0. Overflow, we're going to write hidden. Let us hide our overflow and have a background color of gray background color like that. And now let us style our list items. I'm going to say list items, let them flow to the left. The next thing we are going to style, we have styled our unordered list, our list items. Let us now go ahead and style our links. I'm going to write list and then we add our link here, and we're going to say display block. We have a block display, color, we have color white. The next thing we are going to have is, let us text align it. Text align center. Padding to 16 pixels. Have something called text decoration. Text decoration none. The next thing we are going to have is, when we move our mouse, we want it to have a different color. So we are going to have our list and full colon and say hover. We say background color. Let it have a background color of, we hover now, it's going to have that dark background color. The next thing we are going to look at is ordered list. Ordered list is almost the same like unordered list. I'm going to look at ordered list. An ordered list starts with the OL tag. Each list item starts with the LI tag. The list items will be marked with numbers by default. Just like the one we had here, we are going to have our ordered list and we begin with OL, and then the list items are the same. So we're going to use coffee like we did, and then we have another list. Let's have tea, and the other one is list item is milk. This styling here, let us comment the styling so that you're able to see what is happening. The list items can be numbered with uppercase Roman numbers, and they can also have lowercase Roman numbers. So how to go about it is, you can just write our inside our OL. I'm going to write ordered list type, and we give it type and say 1, which is the default that we have here. We can change this to uppercase letters, and you can see that they are changing to ABC. Can also change it to a lowercase and change them to Roman numbers. The next thing we're going to look at is what is called HTML description list. A description list is a list of terms with a description of each term. The DL tag defines the description list. The DT defines the term name, and the DD tag describes each term. Let us look at an example here. We are going to use our DL tag. We're going to have our DL tag, and inside our DL tag we can have a DT tag and say coffee. Inside our coffee we can have a DD tag which says black hot drink. Then we can go ahead and write our DT tag, which you can say is milk, say white cold drink. This is what we call a description list. It is a description of each item. Like we have coffee, and then the description of this coffee is that it's black hot drink. The other thing we are going to look at, HTML block and inline elements. Every HTML element has a default display value depending on what type of element it is. The most common display values are block and inline. When we talk about block level elements, they always start on a new line and the browsers automatically add some space, which is called a margin, before and after the element. A block level element always takes up the full width available. It stretches out to the left and right as far as it can. Two common used block elements are p tag and div tag. The p element defines a paragraph in HTML document. That one we had looked at in our previous tutorials. The other one is the div element, which defines a division or a section in an HTML element. We will look at the div element in the coming tutorial. We have what we call an inline element. An inline element does not start on a new line. An inline element only takes up as much width as necessary. This one is a span element inside a paragraph. We will look at it in the coming tutorial. Right now, let us look at HTML div element. The div element is by default a block element, meaning that it takes all available width and comes with line breaks before and after. Let's see how a div element looks like. We're going to have header 1. Inside our header 1, we're going to have HTML div element and have a div. Inside our div, let's say I like programming. Then we can have a paragraph. And this paragraph, we are going to add a yellow background to display the div. Okay, so let us go to our style.css and let me show you how a div works. We are going to have our div, open and close curly brackets, and then we give it a background color, and give it background color of yellow like, and that is how a div appears. We said that the div element is by default a block element and it takes the available width. You can see the yellow background helps you see that a div takes the available width. Let us look at a div as a container. The div element is often used to group sections of a web page together. Let us have a div here. Inside our div, we're going to write, I come from Kenya. Let's have a paragraph that says Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya. Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya. And we have another paragraph. We say Nairobi has over 4.5 million inhabitants. So this was supposed to come inside our div. We can center our div to the right. If you have a div element that is not 100% wide and you want to center align it, set the CSS margin property to auto. We are going to set our CSS property to auto. So we are going to say our CSS property margin. We say margin equals auto, and let us give it a width. Let's give it a width of 300 pixels. So we are able to center our div and we've given it a 300 pixels. We can also have multiple div elements. With this, you can just copy this div and paste it here. And in these different divs, we can give them different colors. This was a div here. I needed this one to be a header. header 2. Let's give it a header. Let's call it header 2. You can go ahead and write a few more divs here and copy this, and let us have multiple divs. We have different cities in Kenya, so I'm going to write one, Nakuru, the latest city that we have, and it has a population of 500. We also have Mombasa. It's one of the cities in Kenya, and Mombasa has over 1.2 million inhabitants. So let us go ahead and style our divs. We're going to say this div, let us give it a style, and we're going to give it a background color. This div, let us give it just a background color, and let us give it 1,2 C7. And another div, we're going to style this div and let's give it a background color. Okay, we have used these colors to help us separate the multiple divs that we have. So you can see you can have multiple divs and you can style them the way you want. The next thing we are going to look at is a property called float. And the CSS float property is used for positioning and formatting content and allow elements float next to each other instead of on top of each other, like the way they are here. We are going to have float property. Let's go to our style.css and let us have all these multiple divs inside one div. We'll come here and give it let's have this div, press on enter. Let us have a class in our div so that we'll be able to style it, and we call it my container. Copy all these divs, select and paste them inside our div. Now let us go to our style.css. we are going to style this div now, this div called my container. So we'll write div and then we'll copy this and come here and say div dot my container. Because it is a class, we use the dot sign, open and close curly brace. We say width, let us give it a width of 100%, and overflow, give it an outer. The next thing we are going to style is div. This div, now we need to copy this div here, place it here, and we are now going to style these divs inside the my container div. So we are saying div my container, and then we say div, open and close the curly braces. We say want to say width equals to 33%. Tell them float to the left. Now this is how our div will appear when we use the float property. The next property we can use, we also have something called inline block. If you change the div elements display property from block to inline, the div elements will no longer add a line break before and after, and will be displayed side by side instead of on top of each other. Let us have an example here that we are going to look at. In our div, we'll comment on this, and let's have our div, and let us have a width of 30% like that. And now we'll say display to, let us use inline block. When we use the inline block, they are displayed side by side. The next thing we are going to look at is flex property. The CSS flex property surround the div element with another div element and give it the status as a flex container. The CSS flex property. We are going to introduce the flex property. So we'll come here and say dot my container, open and close. This my container, it is this div that we are using, and the dot is the class. Okay, so we come here and say dot my container, and we'll say display equals to flex. Once that is done, you can see how the display appears. It aligns the divs elements side by side. The other thing we are going to look at is the grid property. The CSS grid layout module offers a grid-based layout system with rows and columns, making it easier to design web pages without to use floats and positioning. It sounds almost the same as Flex, but has the ability to define more than one row and position each row individually. Let us go ahead and see how the grid works. Instead of using my container, let us go ahead and write grid container, and we are going to style our grid container and see how it's going to appear. Remove this and write dot grid hyphen container, open and close curly braces, and say display equals to grid. We have grid here, we select grid, and you can see how it has appeared. Let us go ahead and write grid template. We give it columns. We want it to appear in columns. We say each grid, let it have a 33%, 33%, 33%. So with our, now you can see that it has given us the ability to position each row individually. The next thing we are going to look at is what is called HTML class attributes. The HTML class attribute is used to specify a class for an element, like we've been using before. It's often used to point to a class name in a style sheet. It can also be used by JavaScript to access and manipulate elements with a specific class name. The syntax that is used for class attribute is a period character followed by a name, like what we have here, a period character followed by a name. We had dot grid container. Okay, then you define the CSS properties with curly braces. A CSS as a class property by a period, and then you give it a name like my container, and then open and close curly braces. Okay, that is how a class syntax looks like. We can also have multiple classes. HTML elements can belong to more than one class. To define multiple classes, separate the class names with a space. That is, we can have, like here where we were using our cities, we can have our header 2. We can have our header 2, and let us have a class for it and say header 2 class is equals to, we call it city and space main. That is our header 2. We've given it city name. Our other header 2, we can style it and give it a class and call it. You can come here also and let it have the same class and call it city. Now we can go back to our style.css, and now let us style our divs with different classes. We say .city, open and close. We say background color equals to tomato. If it is going to change, we say color equals to white, and padding, give it padding of 10 pixels. You see, we can now go ahead and style our main city here. So we come here and style our main. We'll say main, and we'll say text align. Let us text align to center. Our city is called Nairobi, not Kenya, and there you have it. Okay, the next thing we are going to look at is what is called HTML ID. Let us look at HTML ID attribute. The HTML ID attribute is used to specify a unique ID for an element. You cannot have more than one element with the same ID in an HTML element or an HTML document. Using the ID attribute, the ID attribute specifies a unique ID for an HTML element. The value of the ID attribute must be unique within the HTML document. The ID attribute is used to point to a specific style declaration in a style sheet. It is also used by JavaScript to access and manipulate the element with the specific ID. What you need to note is that the ID name is case sensitive and the ID name must contain at least one character. It cannot start with a number and must not contain white spaces, tabs, and so on. The difference between class and ID is that a class name can be used by multiple HTML elements, while an ID name must only be used by one HTML element within the page. All right. Inside our document, I will go ahead and comment all this code so that you'll be able to see. And I'm going to have, let me have header 2 and write using the ID attribute, the ID attribute, using the ID attribute in JavaScript. I'm going to write header 1, and I'll say inside our header 1 I'll write hello world, hello world of JavaScript. And let us have here our ID, which is equals to, we call it my header, hello world. And then let us have a button so that when we click this button, something will be triggered. We're going to have our button here, and we say when we click on this button, I want it to display results here, and these results is a function. We say in these results I want you to change the text. Okay, change the text as the button. And now let us have a code for a JavaScript code. We write it using the script tag. We have this function display result that we declared here, and then we say document dot get element by what? By ID. And which ID do we want? We want this ID called my header. You can copy and paste it here. That is the ID that we want, and we want it inside in a HTML, and we want it to change to have a nice day. Okay, and then we close with a semicolon, even though it is not necessary. So in our button that we wrote here, if we click on this, our hello world is supposed to change to have a nice day. Let us see if it's going to work. There you have it. Have a nice day. And that brings us to the end of this lesson today. I hope you've enjoyed and you have learned few things about lists, about class, and about ID. Go ahead and do the practice of all the things that we have learned today. Until next time, happy coding. Remember to subscribe, to like, and to share this video with your friends. I'll see you in the next video.